to Disambiguation. I'm your host, Michael Fawcett. Each week we interview experts in AI, generative AI, and business automation to help business leaders understand how to use these tools for the biggest business impact. In our show today, we look at responsible AI in education. I'm joined by Lydia Smyers, VP of U.S. Education, Microsoft. Lydia, welcome.
Oh, Michael, it's so great to be with you again.
Yeah, great to see you again, too. Before we kind of get into this, could you just do a quick introduction and then also tell us a little bit about Microsoft Education? Just give us a little bit of background there.
Sure. Yeah, happy to. Well, we've known each other for a long time, certainly even before my days at Microsoft, when I was at Oracle, but really been now here at Microsoft for 10 years. And it's just so amazing to be a part of the education team. I lead the U.S. education team that serves our largest K-12 and higher ed customers across the country. And at Microsoft, Michael, our mission is to just empower every person in every organization on the planet to achieve more. And in education, that's just like super real, because our mission is to just empower every student and every educator and every researcher on the planet to achieve more. And here at Microsoft, we're truly on a mission. We're on a mission to enable equitable education for everyone. Microsoft, we annually provide just billions of dollars in either no-cost software or discounted software and services, with the goal of supporting students, faculty, and staff just around the globe. And this truly means that we're focused on just bringing solutions that really can accelerate learning, that are like designed inclusively, and that ultimately helps students learn and teachers teach and foster well-being across everybody. So that's our mission, that's our goal, and it's just an awesome time to be here, and so thrilled for our conversation.
Yeah, there's so many things happening in education, and then of course AI, generative AI, a lot of the other tools that are kind of coming into it. But obviously Microsoft Education has a really strong presence in classrooms all around the world. Can you share a bit of vision around artificial intelligence and generative AI and kind of how it can be used responsibly to enhance learning experiences for all students?
Well, Michael, responsible is the right word that you just emphasized there, like without question. Sam Altman, the CEO of OpenAI, has said that a couple of things. First, he said that the two most exciting industries that AI will impact are education and health. And two, he also recognized that education has sort of gone through the change curve most quickly, actually noting that, initially the sort of a year ago or so, AI in education was like, oh my gosh, hold on, what are we doing? What is this? To this sort of horror, or like, oh my gosh, this is going to like ruin pedagogy. And now education is truly being innovative and thought leading. And at Microsoft, when we build technologies that we know can change the world, we also recognize that it's our commitment to assure the technology is used responsibly, and that's really at the core of our mission. And so for us, we build that responsibility into our products right from the beginning. In fact, we've been working on our AI principles that have been in place actually since 2018. And these principles, they guide absolutely everything we do. They inform how we train our models. They inform how we engineer new software. They inform how we test software. They inform how we deploy with customers. And what we're seeing is that educators can really use AI-powered tools to help, transform a lot of learning. But the tools need to assure that they are, our AI responsibilities are fair and inclusive, right? That the outputs have to be fair and they have to be inclusive. We also are committed to assuring that the AI-powered tools are safe, right? They're safe for a school setting. They're meeting compliance standards, and they should be secure. And to do all of that, we have to be transparent about how the AI is designed to use and how they actually are put to use. And lastly, accountable. Accountable is really important because we are accountable for the outputs of our system. And that's why we put so much into the engineering, the development, the focus, because
Mm,
this is core, right? It's
right.
super important that educators can feel as though when they're using platforms that have expressed commitment to AI principles, that they truly are inheriting those, right? That these tools are fair, that they are reliable and safe. And that's really our commitment to govern and
Mm.
enable effective and responsible use with AI.
Hmm. No, that's great. Thanks. Last summer, and actually a couple times in this show too, I've done a couple different focus around higher ed, and
Mhm.
last summer we did a show on my other podcast, and I had a couple of professors, one department head, and a consultant that was working with some schools to help them use AI, and when we started the prep for the episode, the department head was absolutely 100% against. We can't have any AI in the school. This is terrible. It's going to destroy. And by the time we did the show, which was supposed to be a bit of an argument back and forth, she completely converted and wanted to know like all the things we could do with it. She started to, because we were talking about things that would make it better for the professors, for the instructors, for the students, how they'd need those skills in the future. So it was a really interesting to watch the transformation of somebody as they started to understand more about the potential. So I think it's really exciting. So one of the big use cases that we talked about is virtual assistants, and so I'm curious about how Microsoft sees that. And obviously, you guys have Copilot, and it's been in the market, one of the longest virtual assistants in the market. But how do you see that assisting and enhancing educator effectiveness without diminishing that role of the educator in the classroom?
Well, I love that you centered there on the educator because truly that's where we're seeing an incredible amount of potential change. And your story about that change curve that individual went, and how fast it was is actually indicative of what we're seeing out there in across our industry. In fact, it's a researcher that we work with quite a bit, Ethan Malik. I'm sure many of you know him from the University of Pennsylvania. He says, listen, use your AI tools for 10 hours minimum. Just put them to use. Allow your creativity, just give them a
Mm,
go. And then you'll begin to see, appreciate, and get creative around the potential, right? And
right.
probably that's what this person on your podcast did. And
Yeah.
and what that really has, that whole experiential kind of learning has been what has really sent kind of shaped our strategy. You said Copilot. Yeah. Copilot is our solution, but it's also our strategy. We believe humans are at the center. We believe that tools like AI are empowering the human to with better agency. And so, when we think about the educator right now, I mean, since COVID, right? We know there's been just incredible educator burnout, there's fatigue. It's hard to find teachers in the market these days. And it's our vision that AI tools help this, that AI tools help reduce educator burnout. And so while we are working to assure that these AI tools can help create and customize content, support lesson plans, support quizzes, support rubric development, they help the educator to look at data, like how can you more quickly get to actionable insights instead of like
Sure.
pouring time into looking at the data, more time just kind of quickly thinking about the insights from the data. But then just to close out your specific question about these virtual assistants, we are seeing this really mushroom and truly take off
Mm,
because they can be customized to very sets of specific curricula. They can be tuned to specific student needs, all fairly simply.
mm,
And so these virtual assistants, think of it as a way to reach students who aren't those ones to come to the extra help or after hours sort of classroom support. Think of this as an extension of the educator so that the time with the educator can be even deeper, more rich, and really personal.
mm.
So we're seeing these AI assistants pop up across higher ed. We're seeing them pop up across K-12, and we're already seeing actual outcomes in research around learning impact and improvement. So it's super exciting.
Yeah, that's great. It is interesting, and you mentioned human in the loop. Obviously, we talk about that a lot in business
For
use
sure.
cases as well. But I'm curious about a slightly different take on that. So, what about some of the life skills that we know that are a critical part of the education process? Social, emotional learning, critical thinking. I mean, do you think does how does AI have an impact on that? And does it complement or does it hinder? How should we think about that?
Well, it's truly the application of the tool that can ultimately unlock what you're talking about, which is these modern day learning requirements for our whole student population. Really, we absolutely need to amplify social and emotional learning and critical thinking.
Mm,
These are the tools that students are going to need to succeed in the workplace, because now it'll be about how you use an AI tool, and your social and emotional learning and your critical thinking to
mm,
sort of tune that tool are going to be absolutely paramount. So, I mean, a couple things that we really see. First of all, just the ability with AI to personalize the learning
mm,
can really help that critical thinking process and that development. When we are seeing the deployments of tutor bots at scale, this individual need is met with really tailored content and
mm,
targeted coaching. And as a result, we're actually seeing greater engagement with the student. So it allows more frequency and more customization. So that ability to sort of have a greater reach is really pretty instrumental. In fact, we're seeing, I'll cite a study.
mm,
It does come from Harvard. They actually did a case study and compared students with and without these supportive tools.
mm,
And the stats were just crazy around how that the student was happier. The student was able to kind of spend more time deeply thinking about sort of the critical thoughts required in the curriculum.
mm,
So honestly, like over 50% reported that these tools were very helpful.
mm.
Nearly 80% of them said at least they're somewhat helpful. And the quotes are like, I love having a personal tutor. It's absolutely unreal. That really connects to the
Yeah.
joy in learning that we see is so important to engage learners.
Mm. I think the personalization aspect is really interesting, and I was just doing something for a client around the AEC, architectural engineering construction industry, and one of the problems they have are skills shortages, and they're using the same kind of approach, right? They're using co-pilots or virtual assistants to individualize learning paths for employees that they have, so that they can really teach them those specific skills that they're lacking in the workplace. So it's interesting to see this kind of spill back into the education system, because certainly from a customer perspective, I talk about personalization all the time, and that's gotten even more and more, from an expectation perspective, even higher in the list of things that customers tell us. So it's interesting to think about that in that context, in an education context. And also maybe, in some ways that's the early exposure to that deep level of personalization you can get from the generative AI tools.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, I think that that early exposure is so critical, right? Because
Mm,
to your point, where we're seeing this in the workplace, it's popping up everywhere. And the
yeah.
stats, Microsoft does a lot of primary research around work productivity improvement, work satisfaction
Mm,
improvement, and it's pretty striking. And so, the more that we can have students prepared for that new future,
mm,
the better they are going to be able to be prepared to meet these needs. And in fact, I'll just throw out there, Microsoft does do a lot of work with skills broadly. We actually
mm,
have a whole skills portfolio. You can go to microsoft.com/learn, and there's a whole AI skills commitment
mm.
where students can, for free, pursue guided learning paths, online resources to really help prepare for, in your case, this architecture example,
Mm.
of what it's like in the workplace.
Yeah, that's interesting. And I mean, I can see a ton of benefit from just the fact that using those tools really does help you in your level of comfort once you get into that, future state of employment and working with different kinds of tools. You'd be much more open to that sort of thing. And I think that's the reality of the workplace, right? So that's just fundamental preparedness for coming into the workplace these days.
It's truly the case because there's just a whole new set of, um, sort of realities of
Yeah.
what is going to be a common operating model. At Microsoft, we think about these AI introductions as really something that
Mm.
it's really lowering kind of the barrier between humans and computers. Thinking about instead of a keyboard being the primary interface, it's almost like a pane of glass,
Yeah.
right? Where the interactions are more natural, where it's more intuitive, and therefore that kind of framework unlocks a different level of engagement.
Mm.
And the result is we're seeing greater digitization of just overall common tasks. We see even digitization of like non-digital tasks that had, and so this whole
Mm.
really introduction is sort of changing workflows in the workplace
Mm.
and getting students ready for that reality is just super important. I was
Yeah.
actually on a panel just yesterday at a university about AI, and the teachers were saying, "I just don't know how much to include."
Mm.
And my point was, and this happened to be a business school, and my point was, if you don't include it now, your students won't be ready for the career and call it the experiences that they're seeking.
Yeah, no, I think that's absolutely true. In as you were talking about Microsoft Education, one of the things you mentioned, and I'd like to dig into this just a little bit because certainly schools don't have equal access to technology, and so I'm curious a little more detail around this. But what's Microsoft Education doing to help get these AI powered educational tools, make them more accessible, make them more affordable for all schools?
Okay. This is super important to us. And so and while also being safe, right?
Mm.
Accessible, affordable, and safe. So first of all, let's just talk about the affordability. Um, Microsoft has a whole range of tremendously discounted software for institutions,
Mm.
and we invest a lot of R&D in customizing these tools to education. But as well, what we're doing is integrating these new and developing AI enabled and Copilot capabilities right there into the platform. So, for example, any customer who is using our discounted software now has the ability to deploy across their institution Microsoft Copilot, which is
Mm.
a secure environment where they're not, it's inside your own data environment. You're not worried about kind of external data, as well as this is tuned against our responsible AI principles.
Mm.
And so that is just one example of us committed to bringing these tools into what schools are already using. That's thing one. Thing two is we're continuing to invest and then bring in very specific AI capabilities inside of our platform
Mm.
as well. So we're bringing things like immersive reader and dictation.
Mm.
These capabilities are AI fueled. They come now as a part of our platform, and we're building them as the roadmap for these capabilities evolve.
Mm.
So while there are some additional for fee capabilities that we're continuing to bring to market, in part because a lot of this software is actually pretty expensive to run and build,
Yeah.
as I think we all know from
Yep.
reading sort of the newspaper headlines. Um, but where we can, we're really integrating it right into the platform that so many schools have. So that's
Mm.
really kind of thing one. And as far as accessibility, with these introduction of these AI enabled capabilities, we're super committed to assuring that the tools are accessible, right?
Mm.
Read aloud, voice input, captioning, these are the kinds of things that help not only be equitable for schools in terms of a dollar sign,
Mm,
but like allow and enable equitable learning for
yeah,
all learners, right? And that's
yeah.
super important. You know, live captions has been just a game changer for so many
Mm,
schools that have had English as a second language across their community, across their parent community. And it's really inspiring to see how
mm.
these tools are just changing lives.
Yeah, and it does change accessibility quite a lot too. That's a really good point I hadn't really thought about, and actually that sort of makes me think about kind of the student experience in general. Like how do how are institutions using AI, generative AI, and other new technologies to build a better student experience?
Oh gosh, like where do I start? Like how much time do we have here? Because it's super cool to see just the engagement and the delight
Mm,
that students have it. You know, today's K-12 students are digital natives, right? And they think about interacting with technology differently than I do.
yeah.
And so when learning modalities, when pedagogical environments, when teaching and learning is just more personal and more accessible,
Mm,
there's just better results. In fact, so at the University of Michigan developed tutor bots that were available across a
mm,
whole variety of dimensions, and then did some research studies. In particular, there was an outcome from the university in collaboration with Michigan from the University of Toronto, where
mm,
math SAT scores, they actually studied students with and without the tutor bots to help them
mm.
improve their math SAT scores. The difference was over 100 points of gain.
Wow,
100
wow,
points.
yeah, that's incredible.
And so this difference around that the student was the sort of study goes on to show that the student was more engaged, more curious, more committed to the learning journey because of the experience that AI unlocked. So, you
Mm,
know, I just think that that just cannot be underemphasized, and I hope that at some level it inspires all of us to try now, right? To try
sure.
something now, like no matter what it is, no sort of effort into the classroom, small or large, can will bring, I mean, any value. It's just all the value is incredible. And so try it, even if it's a small project or a big project. You know, the
Yeah.
second thing I'll just share, like really quickly around
Mhm.
student experience, is some new studies that have come out from MIT, actually. And MIT has done a whole sort of like unlock on how to combat systemic racism
Hmm,
uh, in schools where generative AI is in place. Like, what can it
hmm,
unlock in terms of discriminatory practices? How can it identify hidden biases? And it's really interesting because the findings from this study shows that AI has the potential to uncover and combat some really
hmm,
structural barriers that often perpetuate
yeah.
racial discrimination.
Hmm,
And so, you know, what I think is really interesting is that, um, you know, AI can help correct biases in observational data by, like, you
hmm,
know, understanding sort of the interaction around data and this identification in things like test taking. Like, how are the
hmm,
tests constructed? What are the questions? You know, are what kind of biases are unknown but actually present?
hmm,
And so, you know, when we can create an environment and a learning future where students feel includes all students and it reaches
hmm.
all students and meets the diversity of the student population that exists in our society today, that's where we win.
Yeah. I mean, that flips the narrative a bit. We hear about biases in the language models, biases in the data. And what you're saying is, yeah, but the tools can also be used in the context of how do I eliminate a lot of these biases, not just in data, but across the whole, education process. So that's exciting, actually. That's really interesting.
It's super exciting. It
Hmm,
gives me a little bit of goosebumps because
yeah.
we hear those stories, right? We hear those stories of how, you know, AI, when not tuned, when not applied, can makes mistakes, and in some cases, big mistakes,
Yeah.
and that's real. But when we think about getting a very tuned, specific model that we
Yeah.
test against our responsible AI principles, when we get just more use, we understand it better, and we understand how and where to apply it, and how and where to tune it. So it's
Mm.
um it is super exciting. I'm glad you're as excited as I am about this
Yeah,
opportunity.
it's interesting, and I think too. I get in this argument a lot with business people, and they
Mm.
have an experience, a personal experience with a tool, but that's a different, and it's hard to make people understand that's different. That the personal use of Chat GPT or Claude or Gemini, whatever it is, that's one sort of experience. But when you put it in the enterprise, you put it in the university or an educational institution, and you've grounded that model, you have context around that model. It's a different experience, and I think that's something that will help these students be more prepared because they'll have already seen that in their daily lives, their daily operations. So that also I think is really interesting.
You're that's exactly right, Michael. And in fact, that's why we're working with so many ed techs to actually
Mm,
embed a lot of generative AI into the workflow of their systems and tools
right.
that support learners and educators. And
Yeah.
when you are providing it, to your point, the tuned aspect in the commercial model, similarly, the aspect in the educational model,
Yeah.
can really see some great impact.
Yeah, that makes sense. Well, so this kind of brings up another thing too, though. Of course, we talk about all the data, and so data privacy is something that often comes up in conversations these days. And obviously, we've had a lot of breaches and kind of high profile examples of things. So student data privacy is really important. What does Microsoft Education use to ensure that student data is secure and that it's used ethically?
Absolutely. Well, first of all, Microsoft takes student data privacy super, super seriously.
Mm,
We've implemented several guidelines to assure that we're protecting students' information, but at the same time, while providing like useful insights for administrators, for educators. And, in particular, one thing I'll just sort of point out is that all of our whole platform, meets national, regional, industry specific
mm.
regulations. We're compliant with GDPR, Family Education Rights and Privacy Act, FERPA, I mean, even HIPAA, which doesn't necessarily apply here, but
No,
you know,
but it does, but it's important.
for sure. And so we also provide like a capability within our platform called Education Insights. And this is the,
Mm,
tools that like allow leaders to monitor academic progress, really assess for well-being across the organization, all with the goal of giving insights that are actionable to impact learning outcomes. And so this capability, though, really is assures we with our standards of data collection, with our standards and adherence to privacy and security, this allows information to be curated appropriately. It recognizes PII requirements.
mm,
Um, there's no sort of personal information that's collected. Educator and student privacy is respected, and we comply as our very first kind of
mm,
goal to these important standards. These tools also actually provide some real important activity data around students and educators, but we do it with supportive and non judgmental language. We're testing this with
mm,
data access rights, assuring that only those who need this kinds of information is provided the data, just to assure student privacy. Because you know, really, it's important that we both monitor student success, educator engagement, but do so in a way that's really stands to our broad commitment to these important compliance standards overall.
mm. Wait, so we talked a little about bias before, and we didn't really talk specifically about the data, itself, but about bias. But I know the other thing that we see a lot is the AI systems. the models sort of function underneath the applications as a black box. And so how does Microsoft Education make AI tools for educators that are much more transparent and understandable? Or do you? I guess that's part of the question. And then, secondly, as a part of that, how do you deal with those biases in the data itself?
Well, we certainly understand that, with these large language models, since they're producing the sort of what they are is new and what they're producing is new with this idea of a predictive model for language, that's hard for folks to understand.
Yeah.
So we've done a number of things. We actually have partnered with Teach AI, and we've built a whole a
Mm.
toolkit that helps really share information with policy leaders, with educators, to talk about sort of the benefits of AI and how to apply this in education while mitigating risk. And we've collaborated with code.org, with Khan Academy, and just a number of brand names that you'll know to assure that we're providing informational briefs, transparent information, documentation on how things are tuned,
Mm.
and really open access to all of this content. It's all available under Creative Commons to help assure teachers know how to use AI effectively and to help assure that what's behind these capabilities is really transparent and documented. You go out to Microsoft.com/learn. That is our
There.
Microsoft's front door to learning.
Mm.
We have portals there dedicated just to educators. And we outsource, or not outsource, we open source our content where appropriate on GitHub. You can see right there on GitHub these templates and tools, and they're collaborated with the community broadly. And so we're excited about having toolkits like the one with Teach AI to really be transparent and to expose all of what is available to educators and policy leaders,
Mm.
because it's important that we document what we know, we share out there for others to build on it. And so we ask for collaboration. In fact, early days, we put whole prompt libraries for educators and
Mm.
out on GitHub. So, and asked participants to actually collaborate. We have thousands of folks using that prompt library on GitHub,
Mm.
and it's been growing and has been a big inspiration for a lot of what we've now put into Copilot Labs, which is a even bigger GitHub
Mm.
prompt library that spans industries.
Yeah, that's great. And certainly the open source piece of it, I know, I've seen a little bit about. So that I think that's exciting from a transparency perspective, because it is there and available and easily accessible on GitHub. The fun part of the conversation for me always is, okay, this is good that we're doing this today, but can we take the crystal ball out for just a minute and think a little bit about where's this is going? And I'm curious from both the AI, but also additional technologies that may come into this. What do you think the possibilities are around education? And then also, the other side, what are the challenges that you see around this idea of responsible AI use in education?
Sure. Um, well, I mean, the possibilities are endless. And I think the saying goes that we often overestimate the impact of technology in the short term and underestimate in the long term. And that hunts here as well.
Yeah.
So, a couple of things we've published an AI in education special report. It's available off of our website.
Mm.
And we're seeing that the opportunities around AI it really help teach students metacognitive skills,
Mm.
right? This ability to analyze, to understand, to sort of narrate and sort of inform their own thought processes. And so we're seeing what will be a world that's from now where we're just tuning and prompting these models to getting students to really play with the models to explain why they might agree or disagree with AI generated outputs, and to ultimately be, a future where AI tools become provocateurs,
Mm.
right? They spark discussion, they challenge assumptions, they conduct debates. And so when we think about what the potential is, short term, we need to just experiment because while we imagine all that it can do right now, we're really under imagining what it will do in the future. And so the opportunity is now to apply it, to bend it, to mold it, to give it a go,
Mm.
um, because we're seeing more signs from our research in the Work Trend Index annual reports, and
Mm.
more signs of seeing how the workers of tomorrow really, really want these changes. And this idea of taking AI to reduce the sort of drudgery of work, to unlock more time for creativity. The studies are saying that 85% are seeing that these tools are unlocking their ability to get their most important work done in their best possible
Mm.
way, right? 85% more creative, 82% are more enjoying their work. And so the possibilities of where this is going to take us are truly endless.
Mm.
We're looking at AI next week is Microsoft Build. There'll be a lot of new innovations announced. We are looking at sort of scenarios where the AIs train each other, and what would that help streamline that is currently getting in the way,
Mm.
of time spent on creative and enjoyable tasks. That's really what I would say. Just how to think about those endless possibilities. It's really
Sure.
amazing. I mean, I want to sort of answer a little bit of your second question,
Mhm.
Michael, which was, kind of the what keeps you up at night. What's the biggest
Yeah.
challenge? And listen, I think um, there's a lot here, right? Um, are we going fast enough? Is it safe enough? Like, are we being creative enough? There's so many things,
Right.
and so we publish our responsible AI standards. We release transparency reports to assure that we're using a principled approach and a whole like
Mm.
framework. And so all of this is available online. But I'll be super frank, Michael. The thing that doesn't maybe keep me up at night is it's not AI or what we're doing with AI. It's actually sort of the security framework
Mm.
around AI.
Right.
Security is such a pressing like just a
Yeah.
matter for the globe. We have nation state actors. We have global wars that are being fought
Right.
not only in the battlefield but also digitally. And schools have been a victim of these sort of
Mm.
environments, and introducing new AI tools that maybe aren't secure or maybe haven't been tested is a concern.
Yeah.
And so I think it's super paramount for school leaders to adopt tools and bring them into their environment in a prudent way and in a
Right.
secure way, that really can unlock new capabilities and you know flip this paradigm to using tools to like help inquiry,
Mm.
and
Yeah.
exploration, but to do so in a way that's really safe and
Mm.
secure.
Yeah, that makes sense. I think that, part of what you just said in my mind is, I think from an administrative perspective, be intentional in what you're doing with this.
Yeah.
Make an intentional decision on what types of tools you're bringing in, and the security underneath and the privacy and all those things have to be there. Because as we know, there are a lot of threats out there, and certainly trying to mitigate those is a challenge on a good day. And those tools are not just in our hands, I guess is the way to put that. So
That's right.
so that's actually all the time we have today, and really really interesting conversation. And you've already done this through a few different recommendations as we go through this, but at the end I always like to ask, do you have some thought leader, author, somebody that you would recommend that you think the audience would benefit from, around this idea around responsible AI or education, or how we're going forward with that?
I really would encourage every educator, everyone in education actually follows Ethan Mollick, either on social or his Substack blog. He and his wife, Lilac, are both researchers at
Mm,
the University of Pennsylvania. And Lilac actually is a specialist in pedagogical teaching and learning sort of techniques
mm,
and tools. And it's pretty exciting because Ethan's new book, Co-Intelligence, definitely touches on education a lot. And it helps kind of imagine a future of like, he narrates stories around what AI enabled learning can
mhm.
be and it does look like. So, really encourage everybody to spend some time reading. It's a fun blog read, and I learn something every time.
Yeah, that's great. Thanks. That's a great recommendation. And Lydia, thanks so much for joining today. Really great conversation. I think we all learned a lot. So thank you very much.
Oh, thank you, Michael. It's been a pleasure and great to see you again.
Thanks. Yeah, you too. And that's the show for this week. Thank you all for joining. Remember to hit that subscribe button. And for more on AI and other software research reports and posts, check out the arionresearch.com/blog and /research reports. And don't forget to join us next week. I'm Michael Fawcett, and this is the Disambiguation Podcast.